Good afternoon. This is Chuck Cameron with Oxford Community TV. Today I have a special treat. I'm sitting in a sanctuary right in the middle of downtown Oxford for the Emmanuel UCC Church. We are here with Liz Wilson, the pastor, and we're going to find out a little about her life. Liz, thank you so much for making time to talk with us today.
Pleased to do it. Thank you.
Yeah. We start by figuring out what you're about today, and then, as I said, go back and figure out how you got to be who you are. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to now, in this moment in your life.
Well, let me see. My family has expanded greatly since my daughter and 2 grandsons and a bunch of dogs moved in with us, which is a good thing. I'm a dog lover. And the girlfriend has come to live with us also. So we've got a very, very full family life at home, very full. And I have a very full life here in the church. We have just gone through mostly gone through the epidemic of the pandemic, of the disease that we had, the horrible, horrible thing that we had happen to us. We were closed down for a while, but I still preached here, and they had it on Facebook. We made it through that. We did just fine. We've lost some membership because they got way too lazy sitting around having their coffee, and
Yes,
in their jammies. I understand. I understand. But they're drifting back in now, and I love them all and hope that they all come back. They're great people. Wonderful. I always say it. My church is beautiful, but they're not half as beautiful as my people.
And the people are the church.
Mm-hmm. The people are the church.
So you are
they're
right
great.
now then the pastor of this wonderful church. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's take a couple of fairly large steps backward,
Okay.
if I may.
Okay.
You had quite an interesting childhood. You were here and there and there and there, and you had some experiences there. Could you take us back to kind of early years for you?
Sure.
Where'd you grow up? What was home like? What was mom and dad like? Give us a little picture
Okay.
of what it was like as a young girl for you.
Well, I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. Same hospital, different year than Joe Biden, which is funny. But we moved immediately. I don't remember anything about it. We moved to Yonkers, New York. I lived in a pretty little house on Park Avenue in Yonkers, New York, and got all the way up to kindergarten, first grade. In that, I had to walk to school. I always walked to school. And I loved being there. I loved being there. Then my sister, who is 11 and a half years older than I am and passed about 3 months ago, she got married. And we moved to, excuse me, I skipped something. We had moved to Cleveland. And when we went to Cleveland, Ohio, I met my closest of 2 dear friends in my life. I always have lots of friends. I'm not particularly good at being close with just one person. I love everybody. I want to talk to everybody. My first close friend was named Helen, and she and I were very, very dear friends. And she had the same sensibilities about social justice that I did. Her parents were exceedingly wealthy. Her father was the vice president of Ogilvy Norton Shipping Company. I still see the ships go through the locks. Ogilvy Norton, still there, with coal. They did coal, and they were very, very, very wealthy people. We were okay, but we were not wealthy like they were. And I was the only one of her friends of that rank. All the rest of them were quite rich. And
So this is the Cleveland area.
this is the Cleveland area. Lived there for 4 years until my sister did get married out of our house in Cleveland. And we had a lovely, lovely banister that came down to a chandelier entry area, and she came down those stairs. Oh my! It was lovely with the ivy and the flowers and on the railings. Oh, it's gorgeous. Sure. So that was a a lovely experience. And then I experienced the first horrible grief of my life when my sister left. And it suddenly occurred to me that she wasn't going to be around anymore. And I was a terrible mess. I cried and cried and cried. I asked each one of the bridesmaids to please stay. Please don't leave. I can't stand it.
Yep.
But we moved like 2 or 3 days later to a new place, and lived in many places. Lived in Big Rapids, Michigan. Lived in Glen Arbor. I still have lots of family in Glen Arbor. I'm going to go do the memorial service for my sister in July in Glen Arbor. She passed of COVID in a nursing home just a few months ago. She and I were very, very close, hilariously funny woman, the same as I am about social justice, and the same as Helen was about social justice, about things being fair and things being right and protecting the little guy no matter what. And so that's part of my heritage, is to be like that. I was an American history teacher my last 27 years teaching, and I was pretty firm in hitting that about, not being unpleasant to Native Americans and not being nasty to people of color, and all of that thing. That's all part of me, and I can't even begin to resist it. I can't.
It sounds a little like somebody I know who said, treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, huh.
Yes.
Very much so.
Very much
Very much so.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, tell me this. You make me think you were here and there and there and here. And then you taught, I know we get to locally here in Oxford for a while. Could you give me a picture of what maybe an elementary school student in Oxford today might be amazed by if you could transport that person back to your neighborhood when you were in elementary school? What would surprise them?
Probably this. I'm going to invent a word. The smilingness of their teachers.
Good.
All of the people I taught with, all had no problem at all having casual conversations with their children. They loved their kids, and they talked with their kids and joked with their kids and teased with their kids. And that was simply not done when I was a teacher, when I was a young kid. Those were some nasty ladies.
So
Very strict.
Strict?
Past stern. Oh boy. And that was true until I only had one teacher in all those years that I thought was really terrific. And she was a high school English teacher. The last year I was in school. But there was an awful lot of unnecessary grumpiness, we'll say. And I'm not grumpy.
That does seem to come across.
It's just not there. I can't even hold on to it.
There you go. So you're here and there, you Cleveland, and then you moved to some other places. You mentioned something about being out west or down with the mountains behind you.
Oh, I lived in Venezuela for a summer. The summer that I went from age 6 to 7, I believe.
Okay.
And we lived in a hacienda, a real honest-to-goodness hacienda that had a garden with no roof on it in the center of the house. It was lovely, a beautiful thing. And we did all kinds of traveling, and it was just a rarity. I treasure those experiences. We went to the beach, and there were these pretty little purple balloons all over the beach, and I ran and picked one up, and it was a Portuguese man of war.
Man of war. I bet you set it down.
Oh, wow! And it burst on me, and oh my goodness, I burst into flame. It was terrible.
Oh.
And I was on some rocks in the Caribbean, climbing around, and I got too close to a mama octopus who was guarding her babies. And I was probably 5 or 6 feet from her, and my shadow cast over her, and she came right up out of the water at me.
Wow.
My father saw it, and he loped over with his machete in his hand. It's by that time she had departed.
Yep.
But experiences that nobody else had that.
I guess not.
I remember mountain climbing and with my mom. There was a bunch of other people there, but I remember my mom. And we heard this sound. It was a mama mountain lion, and she was looking out over the edge of this outcrop of rock. She was protecting her babies. We ran
I think that's
quickly.
Now, how is it that, what caused you to move from here to here to there to there?
My father couldn't keep a job. Seriously, he always got into trouble with the people who had authority over him,
Okay.
and so he'd always blow it up somehow, and he'd have to leave, and that's just how it was. And so my mom got very accustomed to it, which was a shame for her because she was on the brink of becoming a stage presence in New York City.
Okay.
She was a singer. She had a beautiful, beautiful voice, and she had her debut in Times Hall in New York City. So she was really quite talented, and we had to leave, and he had to take her with him, and so
Yep.
all gone in one step.
All right. So then you're going through school.
Big Rapids. I went to Ferris for a year.
So, okay, you went up to Ferris. So let's do this. We're going to take a break. When we come back, let's talk a bit about, now you're in college, what happened, which direction did you go, why did you go there, and were there people in there who were influential in your life, positively or even negatively?
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good.
We'll be back in just a minute.
All right. I'll be here.
Yes, will I? Thank you.
Hey Lakeville, you're watching OCTV.
Okay, now we've got you up to the point where you started at Ferris State. Tell us a little bit about college and if anything interesting happened during those years for you. I suspect maybe something did.
Oh yes. I take my adventure with me wherever I go.
There you go.
I remember one day I was walking past the college dorms, and I knew that my husband-to-be was in one of those classrooms, in one of those windows, and I looked up. Of course, all these boys from the dormitory started looking out at me and hooting and carrying on, because that's what they do. And I waved to a couple of them. Well, that started, geez, they were all hanging out their windows. And I'm so way more friendly than I should ever be. And he finally came to the window and said, Liz, what are you doing? I'm sorry. I was just saying hello.
To the entire
And
boys.
to the entire boys' dorm.
And they were saying hello back.
They were saying hello back. Yes, it was very funny. But we were there. He stayed there for 3 years. I transferred to Michigan State
Okay.
because they had what I needed, and really Ferris didn't. I just took my basic classes and got them out of the way.
What did you study at Michigan State?
Well, that was the funny thing. I had always wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
I remember when I was a little girl, the teacher started being mean to me, and she yelled at me, and it was terrible. And I thought to myself, I could do better than this. As a matter of fact, I will. That was the impetus that got me into teaching. So I became a teacher, but I had one little route change. Because my husband was going to be an architect, I thought in my foolishness that I would become an interior decorator. And I signed up, I changed my major, signed up, got everything all changed around, and went to my first class, and I'll never ever forget walking in there. And here were all of these women with some jewelry that was unimaginable, and clothing that was incredibly extravagant, and with the scarves and the clanks and the bracelets and the this and the that, and it was all very, very fancy. And
Expensive.
and I looked around. I thought, I don't belong here. And I stood up, walked out of the room, and went and changed my major back. They said, "Weren't you just here?" I said, "Yes." Now I want to go back to what I was doing. Really? Yeah, I do. And so I've stayed the course ever since. I really enjoyed that a lot. Had a good time teaching, and until I didn't anymore. You wear out.
It does eventually. Well, you have lots of options, and clearly you've taken advantage of some of them.
Yeah.
So then when you finished at Michigan State, your degree is in teaching?
Teaching elementary ed.
What did you do then?
Well, I had taught for a long, long time, and then when I retired, I decided that I would stay home and clean out my house. And I thought, what was the matter with my head? No, you don't. That's not what you do. So I stayed around home for a long time and still continued to come to church here. I was a congregant here in this church, but I was very involved in the goings on of the church, and I preached from time to time and did some Sunday school teaching, and I did the children's message. I sat right there on that stair for years and gave the children's message. And we had I will not go into detail, but we had a kerfuffle in church. All churches have kerfuffles, and we had one.
That's a very biblical term. It must be Greek or Hebrew.
Yeah, it must be. So there was a problem, and the pastor we had was going to be leaving. And meanwhile, I had started going to school with a couple of other congregants in a school run by UCC and the Disciples of Christ. They're only taught by pastors, which was wonderful because you got the true word, There was no fooling around about it. They told you exactly how it was. They were great and they were funny and interesting. I went for 7 years and 5 years. 5 years, 250 hours it was a weekend thing up in Lansing. And enjoyed it thoroughly. Just great fun, and I loved the mental stimulation of it because I had already decided that sitting around at home was not my cup of tea. That was not going to work.
Sure.
So when I graduated from that program, I was standing in the teacher's lounge one day, and one of the members of the council came up to me and said, "Liz, do you think you could do the preaching thing full time?" And I said, "Heck, I taught 5th grade. I can do anything."
If you teach 5th grade.
You can do anything. You can do anything. So I started the following February and had my first Sunday in the pulpit. I had been there from time to time when the pastor got sick and all that kind of thing. I did it from time to time. But this was permanent, and I was going to be there for as long as they'd have me, and that was, I think, 8 years ago now.
All right.
I'm still here.
You're still at it.
Yeah.
Let me take us a step back, though. We've got you to here. You've gotten us to here. Which is a lovely place to be, by the way.
I love it.
Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your teaching time. What's it like for kids? What's it like for teachers? How is it for you? What did you teach? Were there teachers that kind of helped you along the way? What was your teaching world like?
When I first started teaching, they were all very traditional teachers who taught and acted in a certain way that was expected of them. They're good people, but it was not me. So I did not learn a whole lot from them. They were good, decent women, and some men, but it was not how I was. It was not going to fit for me.
Was this elementary?
Elementary, yeah. I was supposed to teach high school. I taught for student teaching, and I walked into a high school classroom and became one almost immediately, and I could feel myself going shoop, right into being a teenager again. I thought, wow, I can't do this. I'm not old enough. So I had to change. So I did. I became an elementary school teacher, which fit me much better.
Yeah.
I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't. Those teachers were influential on me. More of I'm not going to do that. Yeah. That's not me. I've got to be me. You can't do this fake. So I had a glorious time. I remember one time the children made a terrible mess in an art project, and we washed the floor in my classroom with the janitor's big old 3-foot mop, kind of thing. I said, "No, you made the mess. You cleaned it up." The other teachers were, "Oh my goodness, we don't do that." I said, "I do." That's what I do. But it was fun and innovative, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And along the way, some new teachers came in, some young teachers came in, and we kind of formed a coalition and enjoyed each other's company.
Now, where were you teaching?
I taught right down the street there at
So
Daniel Axford School.
Got Oxford here.
Yeah, in Daniel Axford, and then eventually I moved over because 5th grade moved. I had to follow my 5th grade,
Sure.
and they moved over here to the Pontiac School,
Right.
which became Oxford Intermediate School, and then it became Oxford Elementary School. So that's where I stopped teaching, is in that building. And
Now, how did you get from wherever you were to Oxford? How did you find this job?
that is really funny. I was going to be married. I didn't have a job yet. I had graduated from Michigan State. I had my provisionary teacher certificate, so I was ready to go. And we had purchased a home in Birmingham, little tiny itty bitty 700 square foot home. And I got out a road map of Michigan, and I put a string under my finger, and I just drew a circle of 30 miles
Yep.
around the place where I was living to find what was drivable. And I found 2, South Lyon and Oxford. And I applied to both places, accepted in both places, and became a teacher in Oxford.
So you decided that was a distance you were willing to go. And then certainly Oxford wouldn't remind one totally of Birmingham. So it's a little different demographic and a little different place. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I had an offer in Pontiac also, and I was quite interested in that, but decided finally that this was going to suit me better. So
I think the town is a whole lot better that you decided on us. I believe so. So tell me about your husband.
well, he did become an architect, and he went through Lawrence Tech, finished off his degree. He was a certified architect. He worked for several companies along the way, and then he finally went into business for himself. The last, before he became ill, the last he worked was at home. He had an office at home.
Yep. What kind of architecture did he do?
He did everything.
Okay.
He did some housing, but he did a number of the small factories around here, and they're still in Oxford. RLM is out on Hummer Lake Road.
Yeah.
That was one of his very first ones.
That's an amazing world. You can sit down with paper and pencil and all tools now that are more technical.
Oh.
But see something that's a building come to life. That's what a skill.
Yeah,
So you both have remarkable skills, but different skills.
different skills, entirely different.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the years betwixt then and maybe this afternoon at about 3. Huh?
Okay, good.
Thanks. We'll be back in a minute.
When I'll be here.
Lovely place to be.
It is. It's beautiful.
Well, we're back.
We are.
We're sitting in this marvelous auditorium. Tell me a bit, if you would, about what's the story of this church. It's a wonderful building. I just love all the glass, the color in here. It's a warm
Yeah,
place.
it's a very warm
What's the
place.
story about the building first?
Well, first, there was a group of Oxfordites who heard about a group in Romeo that was going to have a group of people coming in for a
Like a revival?
revival. Yeah, that's the word. I always want to call it a reunion, a revival. And they decided to go.
Okay.
A big group of Oxford people, and they went over there. And they were so impressed with the Romulus Congregational Church that they decided they wanted to have a church too. They didn't want to have to make that trip every Sunday because it's too far. So they started planning, and about 6 years later, they had a church. They had the architect who did the Romeo Church, and it is well worth visiting, well worth visiting. They had an architect from Detroit.
Okay.
And so this church chose the same architect. I think they did an excellent choice. That was a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
The same fellow did a church in Grand Blanc, which I have driven past, a beautiful church. And they had this one up, as I said, 5 or 6 years later. They paid for it. It was a purchased church from the very beginning.
Outstanding.
I have seen some of the pledges and tithes remarks
Yep.
filled out, and it involved hens and chickens and
Yep.
a side of beef and that kind of thing. So they were a very active church from the very beginning. And the reason that I loved the church so much was that they followed in Christ's teaching to do for others. And that's what they do. That's what they do. They do that. We have 2 feeding programs every week. We have all kinds of ministries that we support. We tithe the church. The church tithes and does 10% for 7 different, 5 different standing ministries, and then we have a bunch more that we have added on to them, things that we take care of that are nearby. We do not do far things, except for a while the youth group did a charity run down to Kentucky every year. But that's all. They don't do, we have several other churches in the area that take care of Native Americans out west, that do all kinds of things. We don't. We take care of people that are here. Local people. And always, as long as I've been a member of this church, we've always done that.
Why does that strike your heart? Why is that important to you?
Because of my childhood. Because I was brought up with this feeling of fairness, this feeling of you take care of what needs taken care of. You don't turn your head away. You look at it and to see what you can do.
Lots of need out there.
Yeah, lots of need out there, and it gets worse. It gets worse. Okay. And we are always trying to figure out what we can do to help in situations, separate families, separate communities. Now, right now, our feeding program that is on Wednesday night has discovered a group of people out in the trailer park who are in desperate condition. They cannot pay their rent. They're in terrible shape. So we've been helping them as an add-on. They can't come into town because they don't have cars. They don't have a way to get here. Sure. So we bring the pantry to them, and we bring the kitchen to them. So they get a good hot meal once a week, and they get a bag of groceries.
Okay. Well, tell me about God. How does God, who seems to be a part of your life for a long time, tell me about your relationship with him?
That's interesting. My dad had a violent temper, and there was no getting around it. He did. And he displayed that terribly one day at our house. It was an awful experience. And I ran off into the pine trees that were behind my house. And I had to get away from that. That was terrifying, number one. Number two, I was angry beyond belief. And I went into the woods, and I laid down in this loamy grass that was all warm and spongy feeling underneath. I can still remember exactly how it felt. Looked up at the sky and prayed. And this it was not a voice. It was a very strong thought came to me that I will stick with you. You're not going to fail. You're going to be all right. Keep believing in me. I'll be with you. And that was over and over and over again, in about 6 different ways. And when I finally got up and went back to the house, I was at peace. And I really have been at peace ever since. I just knew that my path would be directed the way I needed to go for me and what the world needed of me, whatever that would be. And so that was my thing.
It's a powerful experience. Seemed to have had a powerful effect on you.
Yep, very much so. Very much so.
Does that help you as you connect with the folks who come and sit here on Sundays?
I think so. I am I'm very open. I don't hide stuff, and I've told them these stories. Okay. I've told them stories that where Helen and I were when we were as I was a little girl. It's a wonder we lived through them. Whoa! And there were all kinds of things that happened happened when I was a little kid in South America. That happened when I was in Cleveland. All kinds of experiences that could have stopped everything, and they didn't.
Excellent. Well, this is what you're doing now, and reaching out and helping people and letting people know that there's a reason to have hope, even in difficult times. Seems to be the whole spirit of Jesus. He gave us that. So I want to thank you for giving us a chance to sit in your sanctuary, to talk with you, to hear your story, and hope that Hope that we can speak again sometime.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. You're welcome here anytime.
Thank you very much.
Both of you.
Well, it's a lovely place to be.
Oh, it is. It is lovely.
Chuck Cameron, for my life, thank you.